World now. In the United Kingdom, a controversy is brewing on another front. The Reform UK party says it plans to block visa access for citizens of countries seeking slavery reparations if it formed the next government. The party says the proposed ban would apply to all visa types and could target any nation that develops an official reparation framework. Britain transported an estimated 3 million Africans across the Atlantic during the transatlantic slave trade before abolishing the practice in the early 1800s. Successive UK governments have now consistently rejected calls for reparations, which may range from financial payment to symbolic gestures. Last month, the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch, stated that Britain should not pay compensation for what she described as a crime the country helped to eradicate and continues to fight today. The Reform UK's proposal comes just weeks after the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution describing the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity. Let's have this conversation with a UK immigration lawyer, Fadina. He joins me here in the studio. Thank you for joining us on The World Now.
Thank you.
Let's start from the Reform's home spokesperson's statement saying that, countries seeking reparations ignore the fact that Britain actually made some huge sacrifices. But does Britain's role in abolishing the slave trade really negate calls for the reparations that we're hearing today?
Good afternoon, viewers. Of course not. It cannot negate a situation where very dreadful crimes were actually committed against Africans. And these grave crimes continued for well over about 300 years. In between 1640 and 1807, that was before the slave trade was abolished, 1807. Well over about, it was not even about 3 million, about 4.5 million Africans were dehumanized, they were subjugated, they were made to feel like they were subhuman beings, chattels, and this went on for well over about 300, roughly about 250 years. And so for them to now say that because they contributed to abolishing slave trade, that they are not entitled or they would not be paying any compensation towards the crimes they committed well over about 250 to 300 years, that cannot stand at all. It cannot hold at all. And I'm saying this for one good reason. Now, Britain was involved. In fact, Britain was the dominant slave trader, right? In between, I think towards the end of the 18th century, towards the end of the 17th century and I think 1713, they were the dominant slave trader at that point. And in between 1713 and 1807, right, they were in control of slave trade. So all of a sudden, they then developed, they are saying that they then developed this moral compass that we now need to develop, we now need to abolish this slave trade.
Some will say that to an extent they have paid the moral or historical debt from what we've seen over the years.
The moral.
Are you saying you do not agree with that?
No, I don't. I don't agree with that. And you see, if you look at, if people actually look deep into what history of slave trade itself, and why that very particular trade was abolished that very particular year, that was 1807. I mean, you ask this question, why wasn't that slave trade abolished in 1707 or 1750, when they were very dominant in slave trade? I give you one good reason why that slave trade was abolished at that point. It was abolished because Britain had just lost America. They were colonizing America. They had just lost America. And in order to spite America, because in fact, slavery was in America at that point, and slave trade was also very, very profitable and dominant in America at that point. In order to spite America, that was the main reason why they abolished that slave trade. not to do with the fact that they had any moral compass whatsoever.
Let's look at the countries that were named in this case brought to the United Nations: Barbados, Jamaica, Nigeria, and the resolutions, proposal, which is, Ghana in this case. But as a lawyer, what would you say really, constitutes a formal demand for reparations in legal terms? What does this really mean?
Well, what it means, I mean, the UN General Assembly has made it very clear now. It was pronounced that that very particular trade was one of the gravest crimes against humanity. Now, if they now need to move for reparations, reparations will actually cover a situation where, first of all, they would have to apologize formally to the whole world as to what they did was wrong, and possibly they may also have to make demands for developing very, very key sectors of many of these countries, the Caribbean countries and the African countries. And what they could also do is also contribute, significantly to the healthcare, healthcare and possibly the educational programs going on in many of these countries. That could actually help. You see, what we also need to take on board is this. When slave trade was abolished in 1807, the British government actually paid out well over 20 million pounds, the equivalent of roughly about 17 billion today, to about 3,000 families who were slave owners at that time. Not a penny went towards the slaves they were, maltreating and humiliating in all those years. So for that reason, of course, they would have to actually pay out. And the threats being made by the Reform leader,
Reform Party, right,
that as far as he is concerned, any country that should make any demands for reparation to be paid, any African country or a Caribbean country, they would refuse them, all types of visas. I think the man is just making too...
I mean, this raises questions as to whether this should even, trigger any form of, immigration consequences in the first place. It also raises issues as to whether the UK itself is remorse about that crime. But is this likely to undermine, bilateral agreements that we've had, especially Nigeria, with the United Kingdom? Well, if this were to actually happen? Yeah,
it could. In my opinion, it would. I just hope that our government stands firm on this.
Okay.
The Nigerian government, the Ghanaian, most of the African governments where slave trade was actually taking place in those years. I hope they stand firm on this. Because you see, if there's a unity of purpose of all these African countries and the Caribbean countries, and they stand firm on the fact that this reparation should be paid, right? We have the resources in Africa. We could actually call the shots if we want to. We could actually make people understand the fact that, look, if you're going to be going down that path of, you're going to be depriving Africans and Caribbeans of visas, we also have what it takes, to take our trade elsewhere. They could call in China, for instance, to actually say, you know what, instead of us actually trading with you guys, if that's the way you want to go, we go for other countries. There's India, there's China, and so many other countries that we could trade with. So for the Reform Party now to be making noise that they would at least do what they are threatening to do, it's just like bullying countries just because you feel you have that power to be able to bully. But at the end of the day, the Reform Party just has about 6 MPs in Parliament right now. Although they are leading in the polls, I cannot see a situation, to be honest, and I would want to be proven wrong on this. I cannot see a situation where the Reform Party would be able to command a majority in the next election. I can't see it.
Well, there is the Conservative Party who also agrees on this stance.
Exactly. So the point is, the Conservative Party and the Reform Party are chasing the same number of votes and the same number of people who they want to vote for them. That vote will be split. So some will be voting for the Tory Party, some will be voting for the Reform. So I cannot, in fact, if anything, I could see a situation where, because of the split in between the far right, the Tory Party and the Reform Party, the Labour Party could actually come back to power again. So all the threats he's making is just making cheap, political broadcasting.
You know, some persons say they're trying to score political points because they're not the one in power, perhaps making suggestions to mislead the government in power. But we'll wait out to see, you know, perhaps a response from the Nigerian government and, you know, other African nations on their stance on, you know, this recent agreement by the United Nations. Thank you for talking to us at this time. UK immigration lawyer Fadina, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.